My name is Ruben Mendoza. I serve as the Housing and Economic Analyst for the Launchpad Collective with Carillo Group CANY. The Launchpad, what we like to share with folks is that it's an innovative mixed-use, mixed-income model, pushing the development status quo in San Bernardino by meeting the needs of the whole person and their families. We always say it takes a village to make the Launchpad vision happen, and we certainly cannot be here doing this type of work without the support of our community partners like the Stokes Foundation. We wanted to introduce our community partners in this Fireside Chat series to highlight the collaborative nature of our work and showcase the various disciplines coming together for a common goal of seeing housing production reach the most in need within San Bernardino, but also providing a blueprint for conscious economic development. And so now it is my privilege to introduce our residential education provider, founder, executive director, and CEO, Ray Walker. Ray, can you please share about yourself, your professional background, and what led you to creating the Stokes Foundation?
Ruben, thank you for having me. I certainly appreciate anyone who is helping Robert Carrillo get this initiative launched. I'll go into a little bit of the story of how Robert and I came to know each other, which dates back many, many years. But just to answer your question, again, I'm Ray Walker, and I set out to build Stokes Foundation with initially with a very ambitious mission, which was to deliver the transformative experience of boarding school life directly to students in need. Specifically, having come from a program called Prefer Prep, which essentially, as a child, helped me matriculate at Deerfield Academy in Massachusetts, one of the nation's top high schools in New England. I felt blessed and looked for a way to give back and make sure that other students behind me would have access to the trappings of success and the tools that allowed me to get a great education, go to Georgetown University, and eventually have a career in residential education as well as direct service to students and families. Where I was initially started, I was in Jersey City, and I had been hired to build New York's first urban boarding school for young men in Brooklyn, New York, connected to Bishop Loughlin High School. That program is still up and running, still standing, and still doing well. No news is good news, but it's about to approach its 20th year of existence, serving, when I started, 20 adolescent males from the 5 boroughs of New York City who were going to matriculate at Bishop Loughlin but needed a residential wraparound support. When I left the program, we were at about 28 students. So we had seen some growth, and the building and facility that we wound up renovating, and this was during the initial economic downturn. We basically took the mansion of the first bishop of Brooklyn, which had a lot of asbestos that needed to be abated, a lot of other issues infrastructurally, and was not sound for students, but had a handful of Christian brothers living there. We worked with the Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn. We arranged for alternate housing for those Christian brothers. They got a brownstone that accommodated their community size and their needs. And we essentially began fundraising at about a $4 million goal to completely outfit this dormitory that could ultimately accommodate, instead of a handful of Christian brothers, this building, which is a quarter of a city block big, 2 stories below ground and 4 stories above ground, could now accommodate 50 students plus all the staff and services that would be requisite, including dining hall, workout facilities, things for the kids, to lounges so that they could stretch their legs. Again, these are adolescents, they're growing, and these are high school students, again, in Brooklyn, New York. Essentially, that program, I was, again, hired to build it. Economic downturn hit. We wound up having to accomplish that same goal with about $2.5 million as opposed to four, because of the crunch that occurred. Again, this is circa some pretty tough times in the stock market for board members, for donors. And, and indeed, some people had to pull back on some commitments that they made. At the end of the day, by hook or crook, we got it done. We got gym equipment from Modell's. We went sort of door to door and really just got the bottom line of all the things that students would need to succeed during a 4-year stay at Bishop Loughlin. And we turned that school, which serves 900 other students, into a campus community with an existing school and an existing real estate asset that was underused.
Ray, I really appreciate the wraparound approach in addressing our students, right? Our young people. We demand so much of them, and we expect them to show up and perform at 100%, but not having access to the most basic needs, right? Like shelter, food, and clean water. And that's where I see the Stokes Foundation, again, providing that holistic wraparound service.
I think people are getting better at identifying that. Some schools are outfitted with laundry rooms, for instance. But I go one step further, and we do have our mission sort of rooted in Maslow's hierarchy of human need. In other words, if a student isn't, functioning and being surrounded by the most basic needs, they cannot then go worry about what's going on in the classroom or how awesome the new educational framework that you brought to the table in their school district is. There's a blockage there. And so, in addition to like food and those core necessities like a roof over your head, there's also safety from harm. There's also love and compassionate adults being around you. And if you talk to any teacher in the United States, they won't always know all the exact reasons, but they could usually point out the 3 kids in their class who would take off like a rocket ship if only they didn't have to go home. If only they had something else and some other living arrangement, they would thrive. And we look to provide that by, again, giving those most basic needs and making sure that those are addressed. And then we have a culture of high expectations for students to participate in athletics, extracurriculars, serve as leaders in their community, and do community service as well. So, these are students who, we're going to put some money behind them, but they're going to make a huge commitment to their community.
Thank you for sharing your mission about the Stokes Foundation with us. How did you take that mission in supporting the Launchpad vision? What is it that brought you to integrate these two entities with one another?
Well, that came about serendipitously, actually. So, one of my first and most formative experiences, I'm 50 years old now. I've been in residential education more than half of my life, but I started in early opportunities working as a teaching assistant for a program called Prep for Prep, a leadership development organization that has a preparatory component as students prepare to matriculate at these top high schools, and most of them are coming from New York City's public school system. And again, I was a product of that program. The summer after my sophomore year in high school, this is like my first summer job, I went to go work as a teaching assistant and what's called an advisor there. Basically, you have a 45-minute advisor group. You work with a group of students who are in middle school. They're preparing to take the steps that you've traveled, and you're helping leave the trail of breadcrumbs for them. So in my third summer, I had the pleasure to have one of the most remarkable, memorable, and cutest students. He was one of the shorter kids in his contingent and his group, but he was definitely full of smiles and really dynamic and engaging. I had the pleasure to be a teaching assistant and advisor to Robert Carrillo. And while we were only a few years apart in age, and so now, again, years later, we are peers, right? We over the years would see each other. It was always a lot of love. It was always a pound and a hug. We would see each other at the annual gala that Prep holds, which is called the Lilac Ball. We would give each other a hug and an embrace, and we would say, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you up to?" And we would talk about, "Hey, man, we should work together. We should do something. We should stay up." And I think a lot of times people make those promises, and then bringing it to fruition is actually the tough part. Well, again, serendipitously, last summer while I was traveling to Toronto and then upstate New York, I had a heart attack, and I literally almost lost the ability to be talking to you today. So in the course of 1 week, I had about 4 heart attacks. I thought they were, couched. They were couched sort of as back pain, and I tried to keep it moving and take hot showers and just get myself through the pain that I was feeling, which was excruciating. At the end of the day, at the end of that week, I wound up going to urgent care and figuring it out like, this is not just a backache or a strain that I had. Sure enough, they got me to care. I was able to have a successful stent implant surgery. And the reason I bring that up is because, it's not a sob story. It's really the catalyst that allowed Robert and I to have yet another conversation. So I got back home. I got started on my recovery, which was not linear. It was not an easy year for me this past year. But I had to figure out if I was going to post this to social media. Very sensitive stuff. I kind of felt embarrassed. A lot of times, people, on social media, especially, like you look at someone who's had a tough medical condition or experience, And we almost blame the victims sometimes, like it's like, oh, they weren't in shape, oh, they didn't take care of themselves. Well, there's also genetics. And so, and my grandmother passed away from a heart attack at age 44. So I had already outlived her. She had her fourth heart attack at age 44, and being, an African American male, I'm in a high risk category as it is. So again, I had already tried to start eating better. All these things I was trying to make as life changes, I still wound up having a heart attack right in the middle of those positive changes. And I thought it was important that I posted, that I actually, let people know, because again, it had been so deceptive and couched in literally just in back pain. I want someone else to know that, going to the urgent care, getting a simple electrocardiogram, getting a simple blood test where they're running and checking for troponin levels in your blood, that could literally save someone's life. Just that simple, quick test that you could do at any given urgent care. And I said, man, if this even reaches one person who hears this and then tells their uncle, or tells their father, or it's them themselves, they feel that back pain that just isn't quite right, and they just go to the urgent care, get it checked out instead of trying to march through it. I was like, it would be worth it. So again, I wasn't sure. I was uneasy about it. But when I posted to my socials, something pretty amazing happened. Several hundred messages came through, and it was like, I guess it was what people would have said if I had passed away. I'm like, it was a lot of people like, Ray, we're glad you're here, man. Your energy is needed. Stokes Foundation is needed on the landscape of our country. Now we see what you're doing, man. This is great. And one of those individuals that caught the post was Robert. He's like, Ray, all these years, he's like, I didn't actually catch, that's what you were trying to do. We were like, let's hop on a call. And I said, oh, yeah, well, I'm also, Robert, if you know, is also working with Lucha, which is a wonderful sports-based youth development program. And Lucha has a film that is an absolute stunner, an absolute like top 10 Netflix quality documentary film, cinematography, storyline, everything is genuine, authentic, and beautiful, and painful and wonderful all at the same time. And so I was like, Robert, man, like I'm serving on the board of a film festival out in California. I'm like, let me get you into this film festival. And he's like, well, brother, he's like, that's wonderful. He's like, but I see what you're trying to do. He said, would a single story in a new development in San Bernardino help you to serve students? And my jaw dropped for obvious reasons. Again, I've been, trying to get Stokes Foundation launched for several years now, and it's not easy to find real estate assets. Usually, what I'm looking at and what I've even been offered are real estate assets that are upside down, that they need $1 million worth of renovation. Sometimes we've had feasibility studies done, and our architecture firm essentially says, unless they let you raise the entire building, it would be unethical to try to fundraise behind this opportunity. So I've had, diocesan entities and other entities say, hey, you could take this building for $1 lease, just renovate it. Well, it's not that simple, because I then have to go try to fundraise, and it has to be something that is viable, that is not just like a money pit. So again, it's not automatic. We do believe there are a lot of real estate assets nationwide that can easily be tapped into with the right connections. But again, that'll be a lot easier when we're the size of a KIPP schools, or when we're the size of even Prep for Prep, or a Better Chance. There are organizations out there that are getting students connected to really good forms of education. We want to be a predominant name in residential education. There's a lot of stigma associated with residential education, bad things happening to students. Again, I mentioned a program that I founded 20 years ago. You've never heard anything negative happening out of Bishop Loughlin in Brooklyn, New York. It's a secular program. It's connected to a diocesan school. It's serving students every single day. And in San Bernardino, furthermore, most likely connected to San Bernardino High, we would have students right down the block living in a dormitory in state of the art, not secondhand conditions in terms of the infrastructure, the building, and the physical plant. And as Robert began to tell me more about the Launchpad's model, whether it's LEED certification or other things that are built upon its sustainability, it literally changed some of the paradigms around my annual operating budgets. So the budgets for Stokes Foundation programs are not just wind address. Again, I've done this. I managed a program for 5 years. I know my budgets. I've extrapolated them over time for changes in the economy. So these are based on budget actuals, but they are indeed extrapolated out. But I've taken into account, fuel, logistics, everything having changed. since the Bishop Lachlan program. Robert comes along and he literally says, well, your heat and hot water is going to come from solar energy, and you're not going to have that heating oil bill that you thought you were going to have for the year. Furthermore, it's going to be no capital commitment, which I think is ridiculously generous approach for Robert to take and for the Launchpad to take. However, in terms of sustainable tenancy, for an upstart program that's going to change the game, like Stokes Foundation or like some of the other individuals who will be tenants of the Launchpad, it's transformative. It's a lifeline. It's what some of these orgs need, and it's literally all they need to thrive and to exist, for decades into the future. So to not have to raise the type of capital that I would have in a traditional Stokes Foundation model build, to have below market rent, to have extended terms, and to have the amenities and the things that students will need, in terms of furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and all the other things that Stokes Foundation will bring to the table. It's just going to be an awesome opportunity. And I think we were looking at around 16 adolescent females, and that would be a start in San Bernardino, but it would serve as not only a pilot program for Stokes Foundation, a pilot, venture for the Launchpad, but also hopefully something that we can rinse, wash, and repeat. In other words, as Launchpad moves into other target geographies, hopefully Stokes Foundation could continue tenancy. There's a lot of, there's CDFI funds out there. There are a lot of other ways to have funds available to get this started. We do rely on donations, so we are looking for people to come and like literally back Stokes Foundation just the way you would want them to invest in Launchpad. And that investment, when it comes to providing students with those most basic human hierarchical needs, is going to pay, 100-fold in the San Bernardino area and beyond.
I really like how you captured really all of it, right from the beginning to now. What is my connection to Robert Carrillo within my own organization of Stokes Foundation with respect to the Launchpad? And I think it's, for me, what I'm getting out of the conversation is like these two concepts kind of married each other, right? On the one hand, this Launchpad is trying to address the young person and their needs, and Stokes Foundation is trying to do the exact same thing. But on one side, you have it with real estate, and then on the other side, you have it with education. And you marry both of those and you couple both of those because it's vital, it's important.
Imagine the synergies of a student who graduates or is getting ready for graduation, and they know that they want to be an entrepreneur, and perhaps they start in the small business incubator while they're still in high school or really getting out or getting ready to head to a local college or a regional college. They might be running a business downstairs. It's the type of thing that can transform lives, certainly can transform communities. I had the ability to go out and do site visits with Robert and his team, and I got to see the level of need in the San Bernardino community and area, and yet the level of upside that exists at the same time, hand in hand. Just tremendous upside. Like if you have any ounce of vision, you can see what that community can be with the right type of for-profit and nonprofit entities, as well as civic and city and state entities taking a vested interest.
You hit it right on the nail. It's that public and private partnership, right? And how can we serve as a steward within our San Bernardino community to ultimately produce something like the Launchpad that we know is going to have a positive impact, positive influence on not just the housing within the vicinity, not just the economic development of the area, but the actual upbringing of this young person and who they become to be as they grow up and then immersify themselves in school and the workforce.
Yeah, we also got to meet some of the other constituencies that Robert's been networking with in the region. And so, while we are not specifically a homelessness based and homelessness targeting organization, we're an education and residential education foundation, and we want to proliferate that nationwide for adolescents. The number of homeless adolescents in the state of California, as well as specifically the region of San Bernardino, is something that is heartbreaking and unacceptable. You guys have all the numbers, math, and metrics behind it, and it's actually in the PDF materials on the Stokes Foundation website that Robert and I generated at www.stokesfoundation.org. There's an entire prospectus there, which includes some of the renderings and the models and shows you what's going on. It also shows you some of the math and how as Robert likes to say, Launchpad just pencils out, right? Like, even though this is going to be below market rent, anyone who invests in Launchpad is going to see a return on their investment. It's just pretty phenomenal. It's there again because I have to report to a board. I actually had people who are in real estate equity, like hedge fund firms, kick the tires on some of these numbers just to make sure that if I were going and speaking and fundraising, that all this stuff was viable. And they're like, yeah, it's doing well while doing good. It's making money, and something that's got a very good upside in terms of its overall sustainability, and then yes, doing at the same time doing good for community.
That was a powerful statement right there at the end. I really appreciated that summary. Ray, is there anything else that you would like to share with folks here about Stokes Foundation as it relates to the development of Launchpad that you haven't shared already?
Well, we're just looking forward to having our first target geography. We're actually also trying to support an existing residential program in the state of Pennsylvania. And as I understand it, Robert's also seeing some traction in Pennsylvania, which is totally coincidental. Like, these things came from two separate areas of my life, or rather Venn diagrams of people in my network. And we would like to try to see in upcoming and in future years more residential programs as opposed to less. So concurrently, we're trying to raise enough money just to keep this one program in Pennsylvania from shutting down. And that, I think, is going to be important. They have a 35K shortfall per year. That's nominal for the type of program that can serve 4 to 8 students, keep them housed, give them all the things they need to succeed in school, have them attend an awesome school and thrive, right? They also have a legacy of many alumni who now they're realizing, hey, this program, is at risk. So we're trying to rally those constituencies and keep, again, make sure that there's one more residential program on the map next year as opposed to one that closed down. And what Launchpad can do, because of the efficiencies and the economies of scale that I see down the road, more when, Launchpad is buying more mods as opposed to getting its first order in of mods, right? These modular, almost prefabricated developments that kind of piece together that we've seen nowadays. When you're producing them in bulk and buying them in bulk, you then have the ability to have some economy of scale, right? So imagine how quickly Stokes Foundation can begin to grow on a national level if it's given just this one shot in San Bernardino. So as a result, I'm not just petitioning for Stokes, right, for us to have a floor. I'm saying that the Launchpad San Bernardino, regardless of our affiliation, needs to break ground. We need everyone to jump in and to give a crap and to care and to take some interest or ask some questions. That's the one thing that I would encourage people to do. The PDF on our website is there. It speaks volumes on its own. I know you guys have some awesome materials that you've put together and refined. I'm trying to become versed with them so that I can sort of spread the word. And I think that, if we have enough people take interest, it's going to be an awesome venture.
Ray, before we close our interview for today, please let folks know one more time how they can reach you and your website.
Again, I'm Ray Walker. I'm the founder, executive director, and CEO of Stokes Foundation. We're a registered 501c3. We have a gold star on NiStar, which is accredited. You can go on the federal, IRS.gov and see what we're about, as well as you can get tools to see that we account for us in a transparent way. We're a fledgling nonprofit trying to change the game and disrupt. Again, when KIPP schools started, no one knew what they were and could really articulate what a charter school is. And right now, they're one of the preeminent brands when it comes to charter school education. We'd like Stokes Foundation to be that same catalyst, that same household recognition when it comes to the specific vertical of residential education for adolescents. Now, that being said, if you want to donate, if you want to learn more, if you want to look at our perspectives, which marry Stokes Foundation to the Launchpad, you go to www.stokesfoundation.org. Feel free to email me as well. All of my contact information in my full bio.
Ray, thank you so much again for joining us in this Fireside Chat series. And here at the Launchpad, look forward to continuing our collaboration with the Stokes Foundation.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for not only helping my dear friend, but also helping, the community of San Bernardino in a way that, again, is going to transform lives, transform community, transform the future.